It's really nice to be here for a third year. I was happy to raise my hand twice. I kind of love Romania. I never had come before. Fortis bought a company in Romania, and we did it during the pandemic. And as American, like, there's always sort of like there's an ocean and there's like distance, and it's just so far, you know. And so I come out, and you know, like, everyone in my family doesn't really understand what Romania is, or it's like what's going to happen. Like we're fairly aware of vampires, and but that's kind of the extent of it. And it's just been such a fantastic place to make games and meet people and build a team. I've really, really loved it. I've come out, I don't know, 20 times at this point, and it's awesome. So thanks for having me here. I'm going to try to talk a little bit about the industry. Hopefully it's helpful to you guys. I'm sorry, the sweater's too hot. It's not gonna work. I try to look professional. This is the problem. See, look, you can see in my headshot, I almost got there, and then someone took 4 other versions of my headshot and blended them into the background, and that's what I use for everything. Okay, all right, let's actually have this conversation. How much time do I have? Got on? Is it 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 20 minutes? What? Look at this. What? Down there? Oh, there's a timer. Oh, Jesus. Okay, 38 minutes. All right, here we go. All right, I went back and I looked at the prior iterations of my presentation. 2 years ago, it was the coming apocalypse, where I tried to explain that everyone's life was going to be hell for the foreseeable future. And then last year, it was the dark before the dawn. And that's where I was like, hey, listen, it's still going to be pretty terrible. Now, this year, it's titled, Is It Dawn Yet? And I think it should be. I'm not known for my optimism. My great talent is being highly aspirational about what this industry could do and being extremely cynical about what it will do. But ultimately, I think there's like a good story to tell. So let's do that. Here we go. Quick recap. What did I talk about before? Oh, this is so nice. You guys got a good setup. I can look over here and everything. All right. So 2023 recap. This is an actual slide, though I updated it with new pretty colors. I didn't do it. Lorena did it. But so state of the market, flying off a cliff. I feel pretty good about that prediction 2 years on. That was a rough moment. I usually use venture as kind of like a rough proxy for what I think is going to happen in investment generally. And the general argument was things are not going well and are unlikely to change. And then I moved into 2024. This was last year. And I was like, listen, like, we're right before that really terrible dip, right? Like, this is, we are going to have a period of time before investment comes back, before teams start growing again, before layoffs stop happening. That was the argument in 24. And there was a really good presentation put out at the beginning of the year by a guy named Matt Ball. And he it's 230 slides of explaining, I thought, like, pretty well, like, what some of the problems are. I've known Matt for some time, and you know, he's come around to my point of view. That's the way I look at it. But like, so things were not good in 24. Here's the layoffs. This one's always a bummer. This one always sucks. You know, you just don't want this chart to look this way, you know, in our industry. And the real question is, are we here? You know, are we here before the bounce back? And I'm going to make an argument that we should be. We may not be, but we should be, given what I see happening inside of the industry right now. All right. This is literally my favorite meme. It just gets used pretty much every other day. It always delivers. Something about the flood where the dumpster is still on fire. It's perfect. All right, so what now? What's going to happen? So I looked for the best example of the sunlight coming in and everything changing, and this would be Gandalf. On the light of the fifth morning, look to the east, and the real question is are we on the fifth day? You know, are we looking at the fifth day? And I think so. I think we are. I think we're looking at the fifth day. Let me explain my argument here. I'm going to talk about 3 things because they tend to have a pretty big impact on our industry: money, games, talent. All three are closely related to whether or not we make products and whether or not we're successful as an industry. And let's talk about money first. So the first thing is uncertainty is bad in our industry. Some industries thrive on uncertainty, financial products, gold, sure. For us, uncertainty is generally a really bad thing. And the reason why it's a bad thing is that creative industries require risk capital. What do I mean by risk capital? If any of you have tried to pitch a game, I think the first thing you understand is that it's always a really bad idea to pitch something new to someone with money, because they don't really want to understand the new thing. They want to understand why the thing you're going to do is going to be successful. And the second you start to say, I have a new idea, the immediate reaction, more often than not, is like, yeah, but can you put it in a cinematic universe, right? Or like, yeah, but like it's like Superman, right? Or it's like Uber, but for roguelites, right? Like they're always looking for some pattern that reduces the risk, because inherently creative risk is scary. People like to be in creative industries, but they don't like the risk that's associated with it. And those that are specialists on taking creative risk, even then, it's hard to convince someone else, hey, listen, you should give me capital and I'll turn around and invest it into this thing that's hard to explain and understand. And so as soon as uncertainty goes up in risky businesses, creative businesses, capital flows out. And that's really what happened a few years ago. There was this giant set of enthusiasm, billions of dollars went into Web3, and it's like, oh, this is going to be the future. Everyone sort of agreed. And then the second it started to become, well, maybe this isn't the future, maybe this isn't a thing, all of a sudden, all the money in all the areas started to flow out, right? And that's a pretty predictable thing. We've seen it a number of times in the past. And it's a shame, because I think this is probably one of the best times to invest in our industry right now. It actually looks really good if you're paying attention to things on the ground, particularly if you want to make creative content. All right, let me explain my work. The first is that the market is changing. Some time ago, the Digital Markets Act was passed in Europe with the goal of sort of opening up the mobile ecosystem. Now, the mobile ecosystem is by far the largest segment of our entire industry. Some of you will be independent developers. Some of you will be focused largely on Steam. And again, the question is like, well, how does mobile relate to what I'm doing? And I'm okay over here. And that's been a big thing inside of our industry over time. It's this kind of like segmentation by platform and very specific types of content on specific types of platform. And what I'm saying to you is, if you have a significant change in how the mobile ecosystem works, you go to a really significant reshaping of the market. It changes how discovery works, how people find your games. It changes the business models that are viable on the platforms. It changes what games are viable on the platforms. So in a universe where discovery is low on the app platforms, and all discovery is generally done through paid user acquisition, there's a very limited set of games that can be successful in that environment. And those games have come to really kind of define the mobile platform. They've generally been free to play. They've generally been sort of like a certain type of very light core loop with a very sticky core to it that makes it easy for people to basically deploy money on Facebook, bring a person over into the application, and then monetize that person for more than they spent on Facebook. And that's based off of the structure of how app stores work. Right? If the App Store is not a place where you find your next game versus Steam, I mean, how many of you guys have bought a game on Steam and then never played it? Hands up. If it's not this entire room, I'm disturbed. All right, I have an entire sub tag on my Steam where it's like, you should really play this. It's been 3 years. At some point, you need to commit to this, right? And one of these days, it's gotten to be about 150 games long. It's just the sale comes by and they're like, buy 30 games at the same time for $4, and I get confused and it just happens. But the point being is, it's actually a fantastic discovery platform. None of us have problems paying $6 up front for a game over there, because we kind of trust what what the recommendations are. Like when they come along and say, hey, listen, here's a really random indie roguelite game that's going to be miserable to play. If 50 other people rated it and said, yeah, it's definitely miserable to play, but 4.5 stars, like overwhelmingly positive, I'm buying the game, right? And it's because that engine at the core works really well to find your next game. This isn't how people find their next game on mobile, right? It's not how they go about finding a game. So these differences have a huge impact when you think about what can actually work on the platform and creatively. So I'll give you guys a thought experiment. What if Steam was just available on mobile tomorrow? Like, what would happen? And people are like, oh, well, they already have an app. I was like, yeah. But what if I buy Slay the Spire on Steam and it becomes immediately available on my mobile phone? What does that do, right? And in my head, it starts to just really open up the market. It just starts to change things. I now have discovery on PC that also leads into discovery over on mobile. Slay the Spire exists right now as a premium application. They can't market it. It's basically off of word of mouth, off of what happened on PC, but imagine it just flows through. And that's not a very far-fetched idea. Right now, when I buy a game for my PC, I can now play it on my Mac because there's just a cross-entitlement, right? When I buy something on Steam, it's just immediately available on both platforms. So why not extend it to mobile? And the answer is you can't run an app store on mobile. It was not permitted. That's not true in Europe, and it's increasingly not true in the United States either. So if the large markets start to open up, what starts to become available? What type of content? And then you start to expand out there. Like don't just take Steam, take like a bunch of stuff. Bunch of different types of companies that probably want to have a direct consumer relationship that they were not capable of having before. So you take, we'll call it the cross entitlements group, right? This is Steam, this is people like Blizzard, this is people like Microsoft running the Game Pass, right? So many of them have been unable to release their applications the way they wanted to on the app stores because they couldn't have a rival app store. In a world where the transaction is no longer controlled, where the prohibition on app stores no longer attaches, the question is what starts to move into the market? And the range of things that can become successful starts to open up. If you look at Epic, they have been fairly aggressive around litigating this issue inside of the United States and just generally abroad. And their very explicit goal is to bring the Epic Game Store to, directly to the app, to the mobile phone. They've already released it in Europe. And it may not have a big impact immediately or today, but the fact that it exists just starts to create a certain level of competition. It creates a certain type of game where it's like, hey, listen, I want to get access to the Fortnite audience. Maybe there's a way for me to build on top of this. Same thing goes for Roblox. Their structure of their in-game economy, especially on mobile, and how it relates to developers and what percentage a developer can have has been defined by, the percentage that you have to pay to an app store versus what you can directly monetize if you're Roblox running that. Like these things start to change. Like the range of what's possible starts to open up. Pretty much every social media platform at some point I think probably starts to go into this. Facebook tinkered with it in the past. TikTok I think is probably interested in it on some level. And again, there are already advertisers. The question is can they control the whole stack? And if they can, the types of games that they're likely to put on their own platforms will be different than the types of games that naturally, organically exist in the mobile ecosystem. Okay, so I think this is arguably possible to create a content explosion. And I think it's because it's going to create a pretty interesting set of evolutions in the largest market segment. So that little red area that kind of comes out of nowhere, that's mobile. And it's worth tens of billions of dollars a year. And my argument is that I think we begin to see some restructuring of that segment of our industry over the next couple of years, which means if you're an indie developer targeting a keyword on Steam, I think it's a better business this year than it was last year or 2 years ago or 4 years ago. So what does that mean for games? I think content explosions are generally good for game makers. I think they're mixed for platforms. And the example I like to give is the streaming ecosystem, which is a whole bunch of companies all decided they wanted to compete with Netflix, and they threw billions of dollars at that problem. I'd say right now it's kind of experiencing a consolidation and a kind of a bit of a collapse. But the reality is there's a period of time whenever you have a reorganization or a shift in platforms that has a pretty significant impact. The difference between, I think, us and what they're trying to handle is they priced against the subscription model, and now they're trying to figure out how to jam ads in afterward. And I think all of us are sort of experiencing it. Like, we pay a little bit more for a subscription every year, and then all of a sudden we also have ads, even though we're paying for the subscription. But like, what am I going to do? Like, stop watching this? Like, I'm already kind of path dependent. And that's how they'll slowly rebuild their business model that allows them to be viable over time, which, you know, there's always this right balance between what's good for a platform, what's good for a content ecosystem, and what is minimally acceptable for a consumer. So it's always like searching for that space. But on the game side, I think the business models will always be broader. The opportunity to really like build the industry will always be broader. And my guess is that some competition that comes in on the platform side just is fundamentally better for us over a timeline of like, let's say, the next 5 years. Where we get on the other side of that, I don't know, but you know, whatever. It'll be dawn and it's sunny for 4 days, and then it goes to midnight again, and that's our industry. Like, we've all been through it before, right? So I do think that competition will force some focus on some of the dev pain points. I think that the cost structure as well as discoverability are kind of the two things that really drive what's viable inside of a content ecosystem outside of the cost of development itself. And these are two variables that I think are going to be adjusted pretty significantly. The way I might approach it or look at it is platforms will develop a texture of game that is successful on that platform. We kind of know the sort of game that's likely to be on Steam. We sort of know the game that's likely to be successful on Switch. We know the game that has been successful on mobile for a period of time. My argument is that over the next 4 or 5 years, those platforms will start to extend and kind of like everywhere, and they will find their audience regardless of what your actual access device is, and this will significantly change some of the market dynamics. The App Store business will shrink, probably by a reasonable amount, and the actual platforms that compete will expand probably by a reasonable amount. Like, you have an example right now, which is like Supercell, one of like the biggest contributors to the App Store, like, you know, business model like that. If you go in, they have a link out to their own transactions right now, right? Like, they are now routing outside of the store. These are like seismic changes that didn't exist and didn't happen until very recently. And I think it really significantly changes the model. I've talked a lot about this, but I'm a Balatro fan. I played a fair bit of it over on PC, and then it came over onto the phone. And, you know, kind of the annoying thing was like, I had to buy it again on the phone, then I had to play through it all over again and re-earn the stuff, right? And, you know, I just, in my head, I was like, man, I kind of want this to just be the same account. I want that to just work, right? The same, you know, like, that's what I want out of this experience. And that's really like playing that was sort of like in my head. I was like, if I could buy this on Steam and have it be available on the phone, I would do that in a second. And I think that would start to generate a lot more targeted development at that. I create something like, you know, like a little shooter, like, you know, Nuclear Throne or something like that, and I make it just immediately available on both platforms. I think that's a very viable, like a viable business model moving forward. I think it significantly changes things like our developer margin for developing different types of games. And as a general prospect, I'd say in our industry, we look for a sustainable margin, and then we sort of keep growing our development paths against that margin, right? Like, how much money we think we can make off of a particular game, and creativity sort of like works in that space. People don't really like hearing that, but that's the reality, right? Like, things that don't have an economic outcome on the other side, it's very hard to sustain, you know, in any creative industry. And in ours, I think we are generally more focused on, like, how do I keep making games? How do I keep doing this? It's very hard to assemble a game making team, and when you have it, you really want to keep that team around. And so as a general matter, I think as margin increases, what we're just going to do is we're going to find every single available creative idea that can work with that. And what I'm saying is, for a long time in the biggest segment of our market, the range of creative ideas that could work was very narrow, right? It's free to play, big LTV, huge surface area that you can market to. And if you can't do that, it's very hard to sustain that as anything else. If that changes, it can have really significant impact on the types of games that can be invested in. I think that there's a transition around this. I think maybe we'll call it mobile too. And I think I'd throw AI in there. We could talk a little bit about AI in a second. I think transitions are kind of scary. They really change like how our industry works. I think aspects of the thing before the transition still continues, but those who actually make the transition effectively are the ones that tend to survive. And I think we are in the process of both halves of the model are changing. How we make games is changing with AI. How those games find their audience, I think, is going to change pretty significantly over the next 4 to 5 years, like I've been talking about. Okay, so how do us as game makers navigate this? What's the talent component of this transition that we're talking about? Honestly, I'm pretty worried about the talent side, if I'm being honest. Fortis has hundreds of employees across almost 20 countries. And when we founded the company about 4 years ago, it was really based around this idea that talent is evenly distributed across the globe, but opportunity is not. And if you bring opportunity to talent in places where there is not as much, you can win. That was the basic idea of our talent model. And we thought we could get away with it because it was the pandemic. So we could just commit to being remote and global. Because if we're going to be stuck in our houses for whoever knows how long, let's just build the entire company around it. And so that was how we ended up in Romania, having never set foot in the country, because we knew that there was a talented group of game makers that we could build around, which was the original metagame guys. And all of them are still with us for the time being. They may change their mind in the upcoming months, but for right now, they're with us making a game. The game looks fantastic. The team is fantastic. And generally, the model feels really great. We have fantastic people, and we're offering the opportunity to build a good game. That feels great. And we've done that in a number of countries, and that feels great. And then while we're building this company, AI starts to happen. And I will say generally I'm skeptical about major hypes inside of our industry. When we founded Fortis, we got a ton of pressure to go into Web3, just a massive amount of pressure. Everyone was like, we'd love to back you guys. You just like need to shove a picture of a monkey in there somewhere. And we were really against it. And it wasn't because I just like hate the idea of it. It was just, we just didn't think there was going to be a business there. We just didn't think that that's what the consumers actually wanted. The example I always gave them in response was, you keep telling me about ownership and everyone cares about ownership. How many of you guys still buy DVDs? No one buys DVDs. It's because you want them for free, right? Like you want to be on YouTube or you just want to be on Netflix. You don't care about owning the thing. You don't care at all. The percentage of people that care are all playing Magic the Gathering and Pokemon already, right? Like, and I'm one of them, so I'm not judging. I'm just saying, like, we're weird, and I know we are, right? Like, we're not everyone, right? So, same thing for VR. Cool, awesome. I'm sitting there in my spacesuit in the middle of a room. I'm like, this is strange, it's fine. No one else is doing this, all right? Like, this is a small group of people that are gonna be doing this thing. They can put on a lightweight pair of glasses at some time, maybe we can talk. But as soon as I'm like wandering around like this, and you need a whole ass room to do it, no, not gonna happen, right? Esports, love esports. Went to all the League of Legends finals, all that stuff. Proper nerd, definitely bought into it. Terrible business, pretty clearly, right? Like AI, yeah, this one's probably gonna happen. And we're struggling with it inside of Fortis, which is like, how do you explain to people that their lives are going to change and there's nothing that you can do to stop it? I think we struggle a little bit within the industry, and I think it has a huge impact on talent. So I'm gonna talk about that, and I'll try to leave like 5 minutes for questions. All right, My third bullet point's missing. This is the saddest thing that's ever happened to me because I don't even remember what it was. It was important though. No, I remember. Okay. Creative development in our industry requires 3 things, not 2. Number 1, requires risk appetite, a willingness to try something. Requires repetition. That failed. I've learned from my failure. I shall go out and try again so that I may fail again. And then like around the 8th or 9th time, maybe be successful. And the third one is cross-pollination. Our industry thrives on the interaction of very different types of people. Like a standard team for us is, you have an art director and you have, a tech director and you have a game director and you have an executive producer and you have, any number of people that fill in your team underneath them. And all of these people come from wildly different backgrounds, but they all come together to make a game. I love that about our industry, but like, it's just ultimate, like super hard mode, like survival death mode, like cat herding, right? Like, it's just, they were not meant to be in the same room, but they want the game more than they want to be in a different room. So you can make it work. And I love it. I love that about our industry. And doing that over and over again allows people over time to develop the right language. Over time, an artist learns how to talk to an engineer. And a game director learns how to convince the artist and the engineer to make a terrible career decision by working for them to go make a game, right? And it's just, that's the lifeblood of our industry. And it starts by screwing around making stuff in college, or it starts by, like just having a passion that you pursue. So, one of the big issues inside of our industry is that talent is spread all across our market segments. This has been one of the most painful things for me, which is, I think some of the most innovative and interesting designs are all happening on the indie side. I'm on itch.io, I'm screwing around there buying like games for like 6 cents or whatever. They're terrible and I love them. Like I found so many incredible systems on that ecosystem, and they're fantastic designers. And I love it. It's a cauldron of creativity because that ecosystem can support a single developer coming up with an interesting idea that then finds an audience. Balatro is a great example of that, right? You cannot do that really on mobile. It is very difficult to make a game that goes viral on mobile. So as a result, really fantastic, innovative system designers tend to be in independent PC development. They tend not to be in mobile development. But then the mobile devs are out there absolutely crushing the business model, right? So now we have all the people that work in AAA, like, why do I have to make a service game? None of my consumers want it. And the answer is because it costs $300 million to make this game, and we have to find some way to recoup the amount of money that we spent on it, which requires us to have a service. And if we don't have a service, we can't greenlight the game. And you see that happen all over our industry right now. They try to make it a service, but the AAA people don't want it to be a service, and their consumers don't really want it to be a service. But if it's not a service, it's not a viable business model, shut down the studio, we don't know what to do. Over and over and over again, it's happening. And that sucks, because the really, really great designers of business models are all in mobile, and they're not in AAA. Every once in a while, like a mobile person wanders over to AAA, and it's very, it's a very interesting thing to watch. And AAA is innovating fidelity and world depth. Not a lot of Netflix and movies coming out of the mobile ecosystem. I saw Clash just signed for something to come on Netflix, which is cool. But the vast majority are coming out of AAA games. Why? Because they're fully realized worlds with depth and meaning that people like to spend time in, that feels like they have logic and sense and, intent behind them. And that's where all the really great storytellers tend to aggregate. Not all of them. Some of them are in other places. But by and large, you have a very fragmented talent pool. And a fragmented talent pool has a very hard time cross-pollinating, right? Like, maybe half the room is, actually, let's ask, how many of you guys are mobile developers? Like, you view yourself at your core as a mobile developer. Okay, yeah, okay. Thanks, Fortisans. How many of you guys are indie developers? 100% indie? How many of you guys are AAA developers? Okay, so there you go, right? Now, I want you guys, sort of like a speed dating thing, I want you guys during lunch to go, if you're a AAA developer, when you go talk to a mobile developer and say, listen, I create worlds. I know you create businesses. Maybe we could do that together. I think there is so much to be gained out of cross-pollination, and we have lost so much by fragmenting ourselves into these categories. And I think if the industry changes the way that we're talking about, maybe that could change a little bit, or not, who knows. The last thing is AI. Everyone's talking about it. Let me tell you guys, like, my quick take on AI, all right? So I got everyone fragmented all these different areas. No one's really talking to each other, and if you remember at the beginning, I talked about this is all about taking a risk. It's all about repetition. It's all about cross-pollination. This is what does talent development. All right, here's what I'm worried about with AI. I think it trades talent development for talent optimization. If you are a very clever, experienced individual, I think you can start to leverage these tools, assuming you're not highly skeptical of them, quite effectively, almost immediately. They have a big impact. I write a lot in my free time. Over every once in a while, I just, what do you think, ChatGPT, of what I've written? And it went from sucking to not sucking. That's kind of annoying, because my writing's great. Not everyone else thinks so, but ChatGPT, though, apparently can do a better job, and the gap has closed relatively quickly. It's quite terrifying. So what do I think is going to happen? First, lower order tasks are all going to be automated. I started just documenting economies when I was trying to understand how games worked. Way back, I started as a lawyer, and that just didn't work out. I sat there and I documented economies over and over and over again. And I really learned about how they worked and how they were structured, and why did they do this inside of a game, and what was the shape and texture of this inventory. And now I can kind of just be like, ChatGPT, can you tell me why Genshin Impact is successful? Oh, okay, it's dumber, I'm 5 years old. Oh, okay, I get it, but how many pieces of content do they release, and how often do they release it? And here's all the information from their Wikipedia page. Can you tell me what's going on there, right? And it's just massively optimizing the thing that used to build pattern recognition in junior employees, and it's just gone. The entire pattern recognition layer is basically being removed. So the training ground, where it's this is a bullshit job and I don't really want to do it. I'm gonna hire a person fresh out of school and make them do it 40 hours a week. That's just disappearing quite rapidly. But that was a crucial stepping stone into building up a set of neural pathways that allowed you to rapidly make assessments about things. And that was when you became a mid-level. And then eventually you could start to look at very ambiguous things, leverage all the experience and all the pattern recognition that you developed over 8 or 9 years to make a decision in an area where it was very unclear how you should make a decision. But that all started with, and I'm sure most of you in this room have spent a minimum of 1,000 hours on pointless stuff that you give to a junior person 4 or 5 years ago. So it's gone. Critical thinking gets outsourced. This one's tough. All right, I'm going to give an example. 7 minutes, I got to do this. My daughter and I wanted to play a game on the Switch. Now there's a problem, which is she has removed the Switch from its little docking port, and she plays it upstairs in her bedroom. And we're like, we're going to have father-daughter time. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to make you play Bubble Bobble, which is the greatest game ever created in the 90s. Yes, thank you. And she's like, okay. I was like, all you need to do is plug the Switch back into the TV. There are 2 wires. The wires have unique shapes on the end of them. And all she needs to do is plug the Switch into the TV so that we can play. And so began a 45-minute journey. Siri, how do I plug my Switch into the TV? Siri, what type of TV do I have? Siri, what are these wires? Siri, it's not working. And I'm just sitting in the other room. I'm just waiting to play Bubble Bobble. I'm trying to move on to the next stage of my life. My daughter is on a 45-minute problem solving to 2 wires into the wall. All right. We never got there. We never did it. We never at the end, eventually I broke, and I was like, just look at the wires and plug them into the only holes that work. And she's like, well, what if it breaks? I was like, this is how you learn. When my Nintendo wouldn't start up when I was a kid, I was like, I became an electrical engineer for the next 3 hours. I would learn whatever is required in order to make it work. It was generally blowing on it and restarting it, but sometimes it was more serious, all right? This is just that entire range of motion is gone for her now, because why? Why would I learn to be an electrical engineer? Siri will tell me how to do it. And the critical thinking is just not there. And I get it. the fastest path to knowledge is what humans will take, right? Like, I'm not trying to like trawl the internet myself. I use Google, right? Now, that felt like a reasonable compromise because on the other side, there was knowledge I'd actually have to learn. But now it's immediately catered response to exactly whatever it is. And so the chain of problem solving is a lot weaker. And as human beings, we generally need to engage in problem solving to get good at problem solving. So I'm a little bit worried there. The last is existing ideas are favored. We're all very excited about the training models and what they can do. But what training models do is the sort of like prediction algorithm on the next most likely word, which by definition means that that word has been uttered many, many times before. Now we're getting into the next phase, like reasoning models and things like that, where it's like, can I extend this chain of reasoning forward? But my general point is creativity is really about finding the thing that doesn't exist or finding some way to put it into a new form. And that is a skill set that is difficult to develop if you never had repeated patterns that you used to build a chain of logic that you then use to solve problems that you then use to extend to the next logical conclusion. So I think this has a really significant impact on our ability to train new creative talent in our industry. I mean, over some time, and it's got to be true. I love this slide. I always put it in. It doesn't really matter what's going on. I think if we take aside the existential angst of maybe this is the end of human civilization, we just put that aside for a minute, which I'll talk with you guys about at length if we have another couple hours after this. If we instead just focus for a moment on what does this mean for our ability to think, I'm worried. I'm worried about our ability to think. I think probably the thing that motivates me more than anything else in this industry is seeing a bunch of people think together and do something really cool. I really love it. I think for those of us that are on the right side of the talent divide, we're senior enough and we're open-minded enough about the tools that come. I think it's going to be an era of incredible creativity. For those that follow us, I think it's possible that it's all fine. I think that generally, if you look in the past, transitions reorder, they don't eliminate. There was a period of time when the transition to digital art, there were a lot of people walking around with, I assume, French berets and palettes saying like only true artists use oil. And the idea that you would do anything with digital is sacrilege. It's no art. It's fake. It's pixels. It's not paint. And yeah, I understand the argument, but ultimately here we are, right? And I think the next wave will probably be a lot like that. I think a lot of people are worried about it, and I get it. If you spent 10,000 hours learning how to craft a thing, and someone comes along and collapses that 10,000-hour investment into 6 words on ChatGPT, that's frustrating. But ultimately, I think our industry always embraces technology. Whether it works or not, open question, but it always embraces it. And this particular technology significantly reduces the cost of development. As I said, anytime you expand margin, developers go in and maximize the creativity within that margin. So it will have a huge impact over the upcoming years on how we all work and build. We sit in a global marketplace. If you don't do it, someone else will, and they will be on the same store selling a game beside you. So I think it's dawn. I'm just saying it's a new day. It's not yesterday. It's a brand new day. That's where we're heading. I'm excited for it. I'm very nervous for it. But ultimately, I think that the industry is going to see a pretty significant reordering in ways that are healthy, but also occasionally unhealthy. I hope that all of you in the room just try to stay as open-minded as you can be. It's tough. I will say it's been tough for me at times when I see certain things. The first time I really experimented with Mid-Journey, for example, my reaction wasn't like, oh my God, this is cool. It was just like a pit in my stomach of, this is too good. This is much better than I was expecting. and it's only gotten better in the intervening time. So it's going to have an impact. So that's it. I'm done.
Thanks a lot, Shawn. Super insightful as always. We'll take one or two questions from the audience if anybody wants to ask some. We have one here. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I have the habit of writing down
that's
my
a long
questions.
question. Did you write it in ChatGPT?
No,
Okay.
in my notes.
All right.
So 100%
Take this entire
human note.
presentation and find the weakest point of it. Ask a 4-part
No,
question.
this is for later. No, I'm joking. So you had a slide about creative development requirements, and you had mentioned the risk appetite. But I was wondering, how does this fit in our current state of the industry, where it feels that majority of games follow the same recipe of success and turn out to be the same game, but with different skins? Yes, we do have breakout stars like Claire Obscure recently, or Returnal, if you're familiar with that, but those are, as I said, exceptions. So basically the shift that you talk about seems to be in a conflict with the rigid way games are made right now and the industry right now. So how do you see these changes that you mentioned, happening in an environment that is scared of changing currently?
Yeah, you essentially need risk-friendly capital, or you need a pretty significant adjustment in the cost of developing a game. That's the way you do it. So my argument is that you're going to have a significant adjustment in the cost of making a game. Like Balatro, as a single developer making a single game, if he can not just take it to Steam, but Steam also goes against the entire mobile audience. So you have discovery that expands outward. Now all of a sudden, like making those sorts of games, and again, it's an outlier, but partly the reason why it's an outlier is because of the surface area of Steam is small relative to, like, say, like the mobile market. So if the economics change really significantly, I think it becomes much more likely that a wider range of games can get made. Right now, the range of games that can get made for the amount of capital, that's where you run into the problem. If you want to make a AAA game, new IP, you're looking at minimum of $100 million investment, minimum. Probably more like 200. Once you get to $200 million, the willingness for someone, an executive that sits in a fancy table that has like a plant and like, they do not want to spend $200 million on something that is hard to explain to the market, so they never do, right?
I get it. Thanks for the answer.
Yeah. Anyone else?
All right. One more question,
One more.
if any. I have questions
Okay, go.
about
I have answers.
our mutual Balatro addiction, but
Yeah.
we'll
We can talk about it
we'll
later?
yeah.
All right, okay. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time
Thank
today.
you.